Hey there, SagaTwist here, and tonight I'll guide you through a tale carved from shadow and shaped by fire. In a world where gods lie buried beneath ash and kingdoms burn for crowns forged in blood, one human rises, not by birthright, but by choice. This is the story of Kale, a nameless orphan, a reluctant warrior, a spark in a world long gone cold. His journey will carry him through shattered thrones, ancient flames, and the very heart of a sleeping god. So settle in, breathe deep and listen closely, because this is the beginning of a legend, one that ends not with a sword but with a flame that saves the world. Welcome to Throne of Ash and Starfire, a saga of sacrifice, destiny, and the fire that never dies. The wind howled through the crooked timbers of Embervale, a hill village nestled between two cliffs and cloaked beneath a canopy of palebone trees. Their leaves, once gold in autumn, now fell black and brittle as ash. For Kale Varin, the wind's voice had changed. No longer just a cold whisper, it sounded like a warning. He stood at the edge of the village well, hands wrapped around the rusted winch, lowering a bucket into still water that no longer reflected the sky. He was tall for 17, strong, from farm work, with sun-scarred hands and a burn across his right wrist. A gift from the forge accident last winter. His mother always said he bore the weight of the world in his eyes, grey like storm clouds that never broke. "Kyle," a soft voice called behind him. He turned to see his mother, Marin, approaching with a satchel slung over one shoulder. Her once vibrant auburn hair had faded, streaked with white like frost on autumn wheat. A healer, a midwife, and once, he suspected, something more. Her eyes were wide. "They're here." Kyle froze. "The collectors," she nodded. "The Hollow. Court has crossed the river. Time stopped." The Hollow Court was the stuff of campfire warnings. Wraiths in noble armor who bled shadows, coming not for coin, but for bodies. Humans, specifically. Whole villages vanished, taken north beyond the bleeding hills. No one returned. "We have to leave," she said. "Now. Pack only what you can carry." Kyle dropped the bucket. It hit the water with a slap, the rope twisting like a serpent. The village elders were already arguing when they arrived at the hall. Smoke from the hearth clung to the rafters, like ghosts. The talk was split between staying to fight and fleeing to the mountains, but neither would matter. That night the stars vanished, not behind clouds, but as if swallowed. As if something in the sky itself had blinked. Then came the bells. Not the village bell, the hollow bell. Kale ran. Screams rang out behind him. His mother pulled at his arm, half running, half limping toward the old path that led into the woods. The forest groaned as if in pain, and the trees bled black sap. Behind them, the world burned. From a hilltop, he turned back. What had been Embervale just minutes ago was now a red haze, houses in flame, and beneath it, he saw them, tall as two men, clad in rusted armor shaped like bones, faces hidden behind, silver masks that wept steam. They moved like they remembered how to be human, but no longer cared to pretend. The Hollow Court. One of them turned toward the hill, though Kale had made no sound, their gaze locked. Something moved behind the mask, a flicker of recognition, or hunger. Kyle stumbled backward and fell. When he awoke, the sky was purple. The trees above were silent. He was in a clearing he'd never seen before, ringed with monoliths older than language. His mother knelt nearby, hand pressed to her ribs, blood soaking her side. "No," Kyle whispered, crawling to her. She looked at him, calm even as her life slipped away. "You must go to the Star Vault, beneath the sleeping city. Find the Ember Crown, the last light. For them, for us, I can't, you must." From her satchel she pulled a stone, glowing faintly orange like a dying coal, and placed it in his palm. Warm, alive. It pulsed in time with his heartbeat. "The Oath Fire," she whispered. "It remembers those who speak with truth." Then, her hand fell, and the forest listened. Kale buried her beneath the oldest tree in the clearing. No tears. There was no time. He stood, clutching the stone, and faced the trees. The Hollow Court would return. And others worse than them. But if the Ember Crown was real, if this flame truly held memory and power, then Kale would find it. He would save what remained of mankind, and he would burn the world if it meant bringing light back to it. Kale moved. Like a ghost beneath the twisted canopy of the old wood, each step muffled by a carpet of rot-soft leaves. The Oathfire stone burned faintly in his palm, its warmth offering no comfort, only a steady throb like a heartbeat that wasn't his. The forest here was unlike the woods around Embervale. The air tasted of iron and mildew. Trees stood impossibly, tall, their trunks scarred by claw marks and runes he couldn't read. He passed a crumbling statue, an Elvari prince judging by the long ears and delicate armor, half swallowed by moss and thorns. The forest was eating the past. Time moved strangely. He didn't sleep, he didn't stop, and the deeper he went, the more the silence pressed in like a hand on his throat. By the third day, Kyle began to forget. Not just the path, but faces, names. His mother's voice, once etched so clearly in his mind, now came to him garbled like a half-heard echo in a dream. Panic flared in his chest. He sat down, grasping the Oathfire stone with both hands. Her name was Merrin, he said aloud, voice hoarse. She had a scar under her left eye. She smelled like salt and lavender and wildwood bark. The stone pulsed brighter. Warmer, aye. Fam Kale Varin, he said, louder now. Son of Merrin of Embervale. The stone flared, a burst of orange light that washed over the clearing. The trees recoiled, branches snapped. A shudder rolled through the soil. Then a path appeared where there had been none. He followed it. Hours passed, maybe days. Then he found the bones. Dozens, hundreds, scattered across a sunken glade. Human bones, twisted and cracked. Some still wore remnants of armor, others tattered robes. Each skull bore the same mark carved into its brow, a sun with 3 spears through it. Kyle knelt beside one and studied the symbol. It stirred something. A story. No, a history. The Ember Crown was guarded once, his mother had said long ago, by kings who burned brighter than the gods and fell just as fast. A soft voice stirred behind him. You walk where kings died, human. Kyle spun, drawing the dagger from his boot. Not much, but it would bleed something if it came close enough. Figure stood among the trees. It was not human. The stranger was tall, robed in tattered silver and green, skin pale as moonlight. Their eyes glowed faintly blue, not with life but memory. Elvari, but old. Older than any Kyle had ever seen in books or stories. They tilted their head, considering him. You carry fire not meant for your kind. Kyle rose slowly. Who are you? I am called Erelin, keeper of the Forgotten Vale. I was here when your kind still worshipped the sky. I'm looking for the Ember Crown, Kale said, gripping the stone tighter. I don't care how old you are, I'm not leaving without it. Erelin smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Bravery and ignorance wear the same mask, boy. I'm not a boy anymore. No, said Erelin. Not after Embervale. Kale's chest tightened. How do you... The Oathfire leaves echoes. It burns paths through time and soul alike. The forest groaned again, a low guttural sound, like breath through stone. You have awoken things that sleep beneath. This world, said Erelin, the Hollow Court is only the beginning. The old gods stir, the Ember Crown may save your people, or it may damn them. But you will not find it alone. Kyle looked up. Then help me. Erelin studied him a moment longer. Then slowly he nodded. I will show you the way to the Star Vault. But know this, Kyle Varin of Embervale. The path to kingship begins not with victory, but with loss. As they walked, Kyle looked once, more at the skulls of the fallen. The Oathfire pulsed again, and this time he did not flinch. He walked forward, and the forest remembered his name. The path wound downward. Erelin led Kale through a deepening vale, where the sun no longer reached. Moss clung to the trunks like skin, and pale mushrooms glowed dimly along the roots of gnarled trees. The light from the Oathfire in Kale's hand offered the only warmth. Beneath it, shadows seemed afraid to linger. The Star Vault lies below the world, Erelin said softly, his voice barely louder than the wind. It was forged before the fall of man's first empire, before gods, Chose favorites. Even then, it was a secret. Kyle stepped over a broken stair of stone, then glanced back. And you were part of that world? Erilin's face betrayed no emotion. I was something else then, a seer and a betrayer. Kyle said nothing. They passed through a stone arch that stood cracked in the middle, blackened runes pulsing faintly along its surface. As they crossed beneath, Kale's skin prickled, like stepping through a curtain of ice. Beyond it, silence. Total. No birds, no wind, no insects. Even their footsteps vanished, absorbed by the stillness. Before them rose a wide staircase, descending into a rift in the earth. Stone pillars lined the path downward, each etched with sigils too ancient to read. Above the chasm, a ceiling of black sky stretched impossibly far, though they had not left the forest. Kyle slowed. This isn't natural. No, Erilin said. This place is older than nature. At the base of the stairs stood the Star Vault, or what remained of it. Massive double doors of star metal, tarnished and cracked, were sunken into a stone wall, veined with glowing crystal. One door hung slightly ajar, as if something immense had once forced it open. The smell of scorched air poured from within. Kyle stared. What could break that? Erilin didn't answer. They stepped inside. The interior was a shattered cathedral of stone and light. Tall columns arched overhead, many broken in half, their pieces floating mid-air as if frozen in the moment of collapse. In the center, a dais of obsidian stood untouched, carved with a ring of flame. Upon it sat a crown. It was not gold or jeweled, but blackened iron twisted into flame-like spires. Within the crown's center pulsed a heart of orange crystal, the same hue as Kyle's Oathfire, the Ember Crown, Erilin whispered. Kyle stepped forward. The air grew thick. The Oathfire in his hand burned brighter. Something moved behind the crown, a low growl. From the shadows emerged a creature, vaguely wolf-like in shape, but made entirely of scorched bone and ember. Its eyes burned coal red. Flames curled from its joints. A guardian. It spoke, not aloud, but into Kale's mind. Who dares touch the last light of man? Kale stood tall. I am Kale Varin, son of Merin, of Embervale. I come for the Ember Crown to save my people from extinction. Many have come, all have failed. You bring no army, no divine right, no royal blood. I bring truth, Kyle said, holding up the Oathfire. And I offer my will. The Guardian crouched, flame dripping from its jaws. Then prove it. The Guardian lunged. Kyle rolled aside, grabbing a fallen spear lodged in the stone. He swung, catching the creature in the ribs. It howled, fire spraying across the floor. Erilin raised a hand, casting a warding light that shimmered around them, but Kale knew it wouldn't last. He ducked beneath a snapping jaw and drove the spear through the Guardian's chest. Nothing. It roared and knocked him backward with a sweep of its burning tail. The Oathfire flew from Kyle's hand and clattered onto the dais, beside the crown. The flame inside the stone surged, and in Kale's mind he heard his mother's voice again, clear this time. Speak the words, Kyle, the words that bind truth to flame. Kyle staggered to his feet, blood dripping from a cut above his eye. The Guardian charged again. He grabbed the Oathfire and the crown with both hands and shouted, By flame, by oath, by blood unbowed, I claim the light not for myself but for all. The crown ignited. The Guardian froze mid-leap, engulfed in a vortex of orange fire. It shrieked, once, and then burst into ash. Silence returned. The crown settled in his. Hands warm, alive, Erilin approached slowly, eyes wide. It chose you, he said. It chose you. Kyle didn't respond. He looked down at the crown, then toward the shadowed halls beyond the vault. He knew this wasn't the end. It was only the first step. Kyle stood within the shattered Star Vault, the Ember Crown cradled, in his hands like a sleeping heart. It pulsed with slow, steady warmth, each thrum matching the beat in his chest. Around him, the air still shimmered with the aftershock of ancient magic. The Guardian's ashes scattered like cinders caught in an unseen breeze. Erilin said nothing for a long time. The Elvari's gaze never left the crown. No mortal has touched that artifact in 300 cycles. Not since the last Ember King. Fell on the ash plane, Kyle met his eyes. Why me? You carry grief, purpose, will. The crown doesn't measure strength in swords or armies, but in conviction. Kyle looked down. It didn't feel like I was chosen. It felt like I dared it not to burn me. That, Erilyn said quietly, is what all kings feel just before the crown settles on their brow. They left the vault by a different path, one lit by veins of glowing crystal in the stone. As they walked, Kyle asked questions. He needed to understand the history now woven into his blood. What was the first flame? Erilyn hesitated before answering. Long before men built cities and named stars, there was one source of life, the first flame, a divine spark gifted to the world by the ancient sky god Azaril. Say it granted warmth, light, and memory. From it came fire, magic, and the first kings. And the Ember Crown. It was forged by mortals, from the bones of a fallen star and a shard of the flame itself. It allowed humans to speak with the world and to command it. Kyle frowned. Then why did they fall? Erilyn paused at a broken mural carved into the tunnel wall. He brushed away dust, revealing a faded scene. Men in radiant armor standing before a burning throne, their faces twisted in war. They forgot, he whispered. They believed the flame was theirs to control, not to protect. They turned on one another, tried to shape the world to their will. And in doing so, they broke the balance. He pointed to a shadowy figure at the edge of the mural. That was the last king, Seridan the Hollow. He tried to burn away death itself. Kyle stared. Did it work? No, Erilyn said. But death remembers what he tried. They emerged into daylight at last, blinking as wind tousled Kyle's hair. Before them spread a wide, bleak valley, dark soil, wind-swept hills, and scattered ruins. In the distance loomed the jagged silhouettes of the bleeding hills, where the Hollow Court held dominion. This is the path forward, Erilyn said. Kyle turned to him. You knew I would have to go there. The Hollow Court is not just a threat, said Erilyn. They are remnants of Seridan's pact. They were made by the last Ember King, twisted knights, cursed to serve in death what they failed to defend in life. They serve no king now. They serve the Wakened, flame a corrupted echo of the first, a god reborn in ash and hunger. Kyle's hand closed around the crown. Then I'll take it back. That night they made camp in the ruins of an old watchtower. Kyle sat beside the fire, the crown in his lap, staring into its slow-burning heart. Sleep wouldn't come. He could still feel the Guardian's eyes on him, could still hear his mother's voice calling through memory. Erilyn approached, draped in his cloak. Rest, Kyle. Tomorrow we reach the Valley of Bones. No flame can protect you there. I'm not afraid. You should be. Kyle looked at the crown. I wasn't born for this. Erilyn knelt beside him. No one is. The world doesn't choose heroes, it breaks them. And if they still stand after, only then does it call them king. Far across the valley, in a citadel made of obsidian and bone, the Hollow Court stirred. In the throne room beneath the bleeding hills, a massive figure sat upon a chair of carved skulls and rusted blades. Its face was a silver mask, cracked across, one eye. Smoke poured from its mouth. A voice echoed through the dark. He has the crown. The figure rose. The Hollow Court would ride again. The land changed long before they reached its edge. Grass gave way to ash. The trees grew twisted and thin, their bark blackened and brittle like charred skin. The wind no longer sang. It whispered, dry and raspy, threading voices through the Yaoi. Quiet that didn't belong to any living thing. Kyle and Erilyn stood atop a ridge at dawn, overlooking the vast depression in the earth known only in whispers, the Valley of Bones. Below, thousands of white remains littered the valley floor. Bones of all shapes and sizes, many armored, many shattered. From a distance it looked like a pale sea frozen mid-wave. At the center of it stood a single obsidian spire. No banners, no guards, just silence. Kyle tightened the belt across his chest. The Ember Crown now rested inside a sealed satchel beneath his cloak. It hummed faintly, as if reacting to the graveyard below. What happened here? He asked quietly. Erilyn's expression was unreadable. The last stand of the Flame Guard. 3,000 warriors from the old bloodlines, They died here, trying to contain what Sheridan released. Kyle's throat tightened, and they failed. None returned. Their memories remain tied to this ground. That is why we go now, to awaken the Watcher. Kyle turned to him. The what? Erlin's eyes darkened. The dead remember, but some do not sleep. They descended into the valley. As Kyle stepped onto the bone-littered floor, something shifted beneath his feet. A spine cracked. The air grew cold. His breath fogged. The further they walked, the heavier the silence became. Not the quiet of peace, but of things holding their breath. Then Kyle saw it, a knight impaled through his armor on a broken pike, his skull still inside a rusted helm. His hand gripped the hilt of a sword that gleamed with untouched silver, untouched by time. It whispered, "Hold!" Kyle froze. "Did you hear that?" Erlin did not stop walking. "Do not answer." "Not yet. He bears the flame." The voices grew louder, whispers of judgment, longing, regret. The dead were watching. At last, they reached the Black Spire. It rose over 30 feet high, carved from a single shard of voidstone. Etchings ran down its length, ancient Elvari text woven into human sigils. Kyle reached out a hand toward it. "Wait," Erlin warned. "You must bleed." For this, Kyle drew his dagger and cut his palm. Blood fell onto the stone. At first, nothing. Then the ground trembled. The bones stirred. A tremor swept across the valley like a ripple, and from within the bone sea, something rose. A suit of armor, unlike any Kyle had ever seen. Massive, six-limbed, made of golden steel fused with bone. Its helm bore antler-like horns, and a cape of spectral fire trailed behind it. In its chest, a furnace-like hole glowed red. Its voice thundered in the mind. "I am Varion, Watcher of the Last Oath. Who seeks the flame of memory?" Kyle stepped forward. "I am Kyle Varin. I seek to restore the light of mankind. All who have come before you have perished beneath my test. I don't want the crown for power. I want it to save people. The Hollow Court marches. I've seen what they do to villages, what they did to my home." The Watcher tilted its head. "Then prove yourself worthy of the dead who guard this place." Its arms raised. Twin blades of soul metal emerged from its forearms. The valley screamed. The test had begun. Kyle dodged the first strike just in time. The blade shattered bone where he had stood a moment before. He rolled, unsheathed the silver sword he'd taken from the fallen knight, and struck back. Sparks flew, but the Watcher didn't flinch. It knocked him across the clearing. Kyle hit the ground hard, gasping, bleeding from his shoulder. He heard Erlin shouting, casting a ward, calling his name, but none of it reached him. Only the crown pulsed at his side. Not strength, will. He stood again. "I will not die here," Kyle growled, "because I haven't earned death yet." He charged the Watcher, dodging left, then under. He drove the blade into the Watcher's side, where bone met spirit. The Watcher staggered, then stilled. "You choose sacrifice over vengeance." It, dropped to one knee. "Then rise, Kyle Varin. The valley remembers. The dead ride with you now." The bones shifted once more. Skeletal figures rose, not mindless, not cursed, but warriors of light, reborn in death. Silent, but noble. The Flame Guard. 1,000 eyes turned to Kale. The Watcher spoke one last time. "When the Hollow Court strikes, we shall answer." Kale looked over the valley of risen warriors, his heart thudding like a war drum. He was no longer alone. The wind howled across the red ridges of the bleeding hills, named not for blood, but for the strange rust-colored waters that trickled endlessly from the cliffs, like veins split open in the earth. This land had long been avoided by the living. The soil burned underfoot, and every stone felt like a fragment of some ancient wound. Kyle stood at the edge of this cursed place, watching the hills rise in jagged, overlapping waves toward the horizon. Behind him, the dead waited. His flame guard. Reborn from bone and vow, silent and unwavering, Erlin stepped beside him. No road leads through those hills. No map marks their depths. Only ruin awaits inside. Kyle clenched his fist. the ember crown pulsing faintly beneath his cloak. Then, ruin is where we go. As they crossed the first ridge, the scent hit them, smoke and sulfur, and something fouler, rot soaked in fire. The sky above was bruised purple, smeared with ash, and from somewhere distant, the sound of iron clashing echoed across the hills. Kyle paused. Ahead, half buried in the crimson soil, stood a statue, or what remained of one. It depicted a man kneeling, hands raised skyward, mouth open in a scream. Blackened vines had grown around his limbs like shackles. Erlin approached and studied the runes at its base. This was Ceridan's herald, he murmured, once his closest friend. What happened to him? He was the first to question. Ceridan's vision. Erlin turned to Kale. The crown gives power, but it takes more. The wakened flame. It isn't content to burn quietly. Kyle's jaw tightened. Then I'll silence it. They moved deeper into the hills. By nightfall, they reached a ridge overlooking a black valley. Below, nestled within a ring of jagged stone spires, stood the hollow court citadel. It rose like a wound, black towers fused from bone and obsidian, lit from within by a sickly green fire. Smoke coiled from its windows like serpents. At its gates, pale banners fluttered, emblazoned with a crown of thorns and an eye that wept blood. Kyle stared in silence. Erlin's voice was grim. That place is not of this world anymore. It straddles the veil, half here, half in the otherwhere. Time twists inside. Memory becomes weapon. Kyle looked to his army. His flame guard had followed him without question, but they were few. 1,000 against what waited in that fortress might as well have been none. He turned to Erlin. If we attack blindly, we die. Erlin nodded. Then we strike where they are blind. That night, Kyle crept alone into the hills to scout, go way forward. But he was not alone for long. The shadows stirred. A figure detached from the dark like oil sliding from stone. She wore a cloak of torn black feathers. Her skin was the color of soot, her eyes pure silver. In one hand, she held a curved blade made from bone. She smiled, not cruelly but curiously. "You wear fire," she said, "but speak like frost." Kyle drew his blade, heart hammering. "What are you?" "A memory," she replied. "A weapon, a daughter of the court. Once. But I do not bow to their rot anymore." Kyle hesitated. "Why are you here?" She tilted her head. "To see if the boy king burns like they say." He frowned. "And," she stepped closer, "you don't burn yet. But you could." Kyle didn't lower his blade. "If you were part of the court, how do I know you won't betray me? Because if I wanted you dead, I'd have spoken with my knife." A tense silence. Then she sheathed her blade. "I am Silan. Once knight, now oathless. If you mean to take that fortress, you'll need someone who's walked its halls." Kyle studied her. Something about her felt broken, but not bent, like a sword shattered and reforged. He nodded once. "Then walk with me." At dawn, Kyle returned to camp with Selani at his side. Erlin stared at her with narrowed eyes. "Are you bring the enemy?" "I bring a guide," Kyle replied. Selani bowed mockingly. "Don't worry, Shade. I only kill when I'm bored, and you look dreadfully dull." Erlin's hand twitched near his staff, but Kale raised his own hand. "We need her." And in truth, something in Kale's blood whispered when she stood near. Not fear, but fate. As the flame guard made ready for war, Kyle stood before them, no longer just a survivor, not merely a bearer of the crown, but a commander of the forgotten, a spark in the dark. Above them, thunder rolled. In the distance, the citadel began to stir, its lights pulsing faster. The hollow. Court had felt the coming storm, and Kael Varen would bring it to their gates. The hollow court citadel was a thing born of nightmare, part castle, part tomb, and part something older than either. As Kyle, Selani, and Erlin stood before it under cover of storm and night, its many towers seemed to twist with the wind, the stone groaning like it could feel them near. Selani crouched beside a wall of blackened ivy that climbed the inner ridge. Her gloved hand touched the roots, fingers slipping between the vines. "There's a breach here," she whispered. "Old servant's path, hidden after the siege of Shale. It leads through the whispering halls." Erilyn's eyes flicked with unease. "That place is haunted by memories that kill. Only if you listen to them," she said with a smirk. "Best keep your thoughts loud." Kyle nodded. "Then we go in silent, and think louder." They slipped through the narrow path, past shattered archways and bones tangled in thorn roots. The interior walls of the hollow court were smooth and unnatural, as if carved by something that melted the stone rather than chiseled it. Whisper-like voices slithered through the air, soft at first, but growing clearer with every step. "Why did you leave them? You let her burn. The crown is a lie." Kyle's breath caught. One voice, his mother's, echoed faintly behind the others. "Kyle, you never came back." He clenched his jaw and pressed forward, fists tight at his sides. Selani led them down a winding corridor of obsidian pillars, each carved with faces, anguished, screaming, laughing. She muttered under her breath. The court used to store pain here, bottle it like wine. They turned a corner and came to a vast hall. A long mirror stretched the length of the room on both sides, twin reflections in endless loops. A test of will Erilyn stepped in and immediately froze. In the mirror, he saw a twisted version of himself, his past form, when he'd served as a warmage in the fall of Vale Theron. His hands were soaked in blood. The mirror version smiled, then whispered. Kyle grabbed his shoulder. "Don't look," Erilyn blinked. "It spoke to me." Kyle turned to Selani. "How do we break it?" "We don't," she said, and drew, her curved blade. "We just don't blink." They passed through with clenched jaws and unspoken pain. Finally, they reached a sealed door of dark wood bound in soul iron. Etched on it was the symbol of the first flame, twisted upside down. Selani placed a hand to it. "This is the court's breath." Kale raised the ember crown and held it near. The door hissed and slid open. Beyond lay a chamber like a cathedral hollowed out from the belly of a dying beast. Stained glass windows showed distorted images, Cerridon raising the crown, cities burning, souls being pulled like threads into a burning sun, and in the center, a throne. It floated above the floor, suspended in chains made of memory, every link pulsing with sorrow. Upon it sat a figure wrapped in robes of char and silk. Its face was hidden beneath a veil of gold. Kyle's heart froze. The wakened flame had taken form. Kyle Varin, it said without moving. "Bearer of hope, bastard of ash. Did you believe the crown would shield you from truth?" Kyle stepped forward. "I came to end you." The air grew heavier. "End me." It laughed, and it sounded like everyone he'd ever lost. "Fool. I am the shape of your future. I am the heat behind your purpose. I am what you will become." Flames erupted around the throne. Screams danced with the embers. Selene and Erilyn moved to shield Kale, but the crown glowed white-hot, cutting through the illusion like lightning through mist. Kyle lifted it. "I am not your child," he said. "I'm the fire that frees the world." And the chamber cracked. Reality groaned. The throne splintered. The wakened flame screamed, then vanished in a thunderclap of shattered memory. They stood in silence, the throne gone, but the wound it left behind still bled. Selani was the first to speak. "You didn't destroy it, you just tore off its mask." Kyle nodded grimly. "Then we hunt what's beneath it." From below the chamber, tremors began. The hollow court was waking, and war was no longer distant. The walls of the hollow court groaned with rage. As Kale, Selani, and Erilyn fled the throne chamber, the citadel trembled around them. The soul iron, chains that had held the throne, began to twist and shatter, recoiling like serpents unbound. From the lower vaults, a chorus of inhuman voices rose, howling, shrieking, speaking tongues not meant for mortal ears. The court was not dead. It had been dormant, and now it hungered. The escape path was collapsing. Selani sprinted ahead, guiding them through a hidden servant's passage that cracked and shifted with every step. Walls bled shadow, staircases spiraled, into oblivion. Memory and stone were fusing into nightmare. Behind them, something chased, its form unseen, but its presence undeniable. The air thinned. The temperature dropped. Kale's limbs grew heavy. "Don't stop," Selani hissed. "If it catches you, it shows you every death you could have had." Kale grit his teeth and pushed forward, visions swimming. As they neared the outer ramparts, Erelin turned back. His voice rang out in arcane command. A ward of golden runes flared behind them, buying seconds. Then the wall burst open. The sky greeted them, black with storm, streaked with orange fire from the watchtowers now ablaze. Kyle turned just in time to see the shadow form behind them emerge, tall, draped in veils of flickering memory, with dozens of human eyes embedded in its chest. Its mouth never opened, but it spoke, with Kale's father's voice. "You will never be free of us." Kale's hand went to the ember crown. For a brief second it hummed, not in warmth but in defiance. He held it high. Light blazed out. The shadow reeled, and then it vanished with a scream that cracked the sky. They staggered down the ruins and into the outer hills, barely making it beyond the citadel's reach before the earth split. A tower collapsed behind them, taking centuries of cursed stone with it. The hollow court was retreating, not defeated, but wounded. Kyle fell to his, knees in the red dust, chest heaving. Erelin placed a hand on his shoulder. "You touched the true fire, Kyle, and lived." Kyle looked at the crown in his hand, still glowing faintly. "No," he said quietly, "I survived it, but I felt what it wants." Selani crouched beside him. "And what's that?" Kyle looked up toward the burning silhouette of the citadel in the distance. "It wants to finish what Sheridan started." Far across the realm, the skies began to darken. In the dune cities of Zareth, oracles wept without knowing why. In the floating library of Mirren, ink boiled off forgotten scrolls. And in the east, on the black shores of the Sea of Teeth, an iron bell rang. Untouched by any hand, the world was waking. The flame had been relit, and it was hungry. Back in camp, Kyle stood before his army. The flame guard lined the cliffs behind him. Among them, the living had begun to gather. Wandering swords, broken clans, scattered survivors drawn to something they didn't fully understand. A man walked forward, a former soldier of Orath. His face was scarred. His hands trembled. "I saw your fire in the sky," he said. "I saw it burn over the court. I thought, I was dreaming." "You weren't," Kale replied. The man knelt. "Then let me fight beside you." One by one, others followed, mages, farmers, exiled knights, the beginning of a real army. Kale didn't smile. He simply raised the ember crown, not to wear it, but to show that the flame had a bearer. "I will not rule you," he said, "but I will fight for you." A cheer rose like thunder. The war had truly begun. Far across the realm, beyond the Iron Mountains and the bones of empires, lay the Sea of Teeth, named for its jagged coastline of broken obsidian and pale coral like fangs biting the sky. Here, where the water was black and cold as forgotten, gods stood the Bell of Black Salt. It was not built, it was found, and now for the first time in over 1,000 years, it rang. Kyle stood in his newly forming war tent. A map of the known world sprawled before him. His flame guard Erelin and Selene stood nearby, watching as fresh red markers were placed on territories that had begun to stir, some hostile, others curious, a few still hiding in the shadows. Kyle's fingers hovered over the edge of the eastern coast. "The bell," he said. "It's not just a warning." Erelin nodded. "No, it's a summoning." Selene folded her arms, watching the horizon through the tent's opening. The last time it rang, the Empire of Vale shattered. "In 3 days." Kyle studied the coastline, his brow furrowed. "I need to go there. I need to see what answers it holds." "You need an army," Erelin said firmly. "The Hollow Court will strike back. You're a threat now, a burning one." "I won't let this army burn out chasing rumors," Kyle said. "But if the bell's tolling is tied to the return of the flame, then we don't have time to wait." 3 days later, Kale sailed east aboard a black-hulled ship called the Emberwake, accompanied only by Erelin, Selani, and a small group of elite scouts. The sea was quiet at first, too quiet. Winds didn't shift. The stars above trembled at night, and on the second night, Kyle dreamed. He stood at the base of the bell. It was a towering thing, rough, cracked, and bleeding salt from its seams. No rope hung from it, no mechanism to strike it. Yet the air rang with its deep, vibrating toll. A figure stood beneath it, wrapped in crimson seaweed, skin glimmering like wet obsidian, eyes glowing pale green. It raised a hand and pointed at Kyle. The world does not rise. It remembers. Kyle woke, gasping, the taste of brine in his mouth. When they finally reached the coastline, the bell was visible before the cliffs themselves. It stood atop a smooth, circular platform, untouched by time or wind. All around it, pilgrims knelt. Some prayed, some wept. Others simply stared. Selani whispered, "They're dream-touched." Kyle stepped ashore, and immediately the wind shifted. The pilgrims turned, slowly, all at once, as though tethered to a single unseen thread. One of them stood. An old woman with her eyes sewn shut with thread spun from nightshade. Her voice was brittle but clear. "You carry the flame." Kyle approached slowly. "Do you know why the bell tolled?" She nodded. "Because the sea remembers the bargain, and the debt that flame left behind." Kyle frowned. "What debt?" The woman reached into her cloak and drew a shard of crystal, black and mirrored. When Kyle looked into it, he saw not himself, but Sheridan, his ancient ancestor, standing atop a cliff of fire, holding the ember crown aloft as something monstrous rose from the sea. "In exchange for the first flame," she said, Sheridan gave the sea his line. Erilyn went pale. "You're saying every bearer of the ember crown," the woman rasped, "belongs to the deep flame below. You wear a promise made in blood, and now the sea wants what it was promised." Kyle stepped back, heart pounding. He felt the crown grow heavier. Selani drew her blade. "Then let it come." But the bell tolled again, and the sea rose. From the black water, a towering shape began to climb, limbs of coral, eyes like lanterns of drowned fire, a mouth split open wide enough to swallow a fortress. It was not a beast. It was a memory made. Flesh, and it had come to collect. Kyle stood alone at the shore, wind ripping through his cloak, the flame within his crown roaring to life. "I did not make that vow," he shouted to the waves, "but I will answer it." Lightning tore across the sky, and the war with the sea had begun. The sea howled like a god betrayed. Kyle stood at the edge of the jagged coast, the ember crown burning bright atop his head. Before him, the monstrous memory of the ancient bargain. The emissary of the deep flame climbed from the ocean's belly, its form rising higher than the cliffside ruins, water cascading off its glistening limbs. It was neither beast nor god. It was a debt incarnate, and it had come to claim the flame. "Fall back!" Erilyn roared to the scouts. "Get to higher ground!" Selani remained beside Kale, her curved blades drawn, her eyes never leaving the thing rising before them. "What is that?" she whispered. Kale stepped forward. "I think that's me," he said grimly, "or what I become if I give in." The creature's chest opened with a grinding wail, revealing a spiraling furnace inside. An inferno of drowned stars and bone. Ash. Voices whispered from within it. "Give us the crown. Give us the flame. Give us yourself." The bell tolled again. Not a sound, but a pressure, cracking stones, shaking the marrow in every bone. Kyle's knees buckled for a moment, then the crown flared, white-hot, casting away the pressure, like a rising sun shattering fog. "No," Kyle growled. "If this is a bargain Sheridan made, then it ends with me." The creature surged forward, too fast for its size. It swung a limb of coral and ghost fire down toward the coast, and Kyle raised his hands, summoning a wall of burning light. The impact was like worlds colliding. Stone shattered. Flame met wave. The coast ruptured beneath them. Kyle was flung into the sea. Darkness took him, cold, eternal, crushing, and within it, a vision. He stood on the ocean floor, still breathing. Around him rose a city made of memory, glimmering towers of old salt, drowned kings bound in chains of promise. Above it all, at the city's heart, pulsed a second crown, larger, older, flickering between worlds. The voice of the deep flame echoed around him. "You were forged in his fire, you cannot escape it. You are the ember, you are the price." Kyle gritted his teeth and stepped forward. "No," he said, "I'm the rebellion." Above, Selani and Erilyn battled to keep the beast from reaching the bell. The pilgrims fled in all directions. Thunder split the sky. Then the sea boiled. A column of steam exploded upward as Kale rose from the depths, riding a wave of flame, the ember crown now surrounded by 6 rings of floating fire, spinning, ancient, pulsing with knowledge that had slept for centuries. He landed on the cliffside with a crash, burning footprints hissing into the rock. The emissary reeled. Kyle raised his hand, and the flame answered. No longer a spark, now a sword, forged of light and shadow, of old blood. And future war. He launched himself forward. The battle was myth. Each strike of Kale's blade lit the sea in arcs of molten gold. The emissary struck back with tendrils of sorrow and drowned kings' voices. But Kyle held firm, drawing not from rage, but from resolve. He wasn't fighting to protect the crown. He was fighting to rewrite the legacy it carried. With a final, deafening cry, Kale drove the blade through the emissary's core, into the furnace within its chest. The voices screamed. The waves fell still, and then the emissary shattered. Fragments of coral and flame spiraled into the wind like falling stars. Kale collapsed to his knees. The sea went silent. The bell fell still. The bargain had not been erased, but broken. For now. Selani rushed to his side. "You insane, beautiful fool." Kyle gave a breathless laugh. "I hate the ocean." Erilyn approached. "You just declared war on something older than the gods." Kyle nodded slowly. "Then I'll learn to fight old." That night, the coast was still, and Kale sat by a fire surrounded by those who had followed him, not just scouts now, but warriors and seers and dreamwalkers, drawn by the light he'd unleashed. The ember crown pulsed beside him in the sand. Selani leaned in close. "You realize what you've done, don't you? The other kingdoms will see this. They'll come for you, or they'll come to follow you." Kyle watched the horizon. "I want both," he said, "because peace doesn't begin with safety. It begins with fire." News of Kale's defiance crossed the continent faster than fire could burn. They called him many names: the Flameborn, the Crownbreaker, the Sea's Enemy, and across the fractured kingdoms of men, where old thrones crumbled under the weight of forgotten debts and new powers clawed at the ruins, his name was both a promise and a threat. In the mountain citadel of Velmire, King Dorvain gripped the hilt of his blade as his High Chamberlain recited the report aloud. He shattered. The emissary of the deep flame. With a weapon conjured from the ember crown, he did not fall. He rose from the sea. Dorvain spat into the fire. "Then Ceridan's line truly endures," he muttered. "I thought the ember was finally snuffed." "He wears the crown," the Chamberlain said carefully, "but not as a tyrant. He's not declared himself king." Dorvain stood pacing. "That is worse. A king we can fight, a hero the people will follow him." In the Valewood, Queen Serena of the Hollow Fae listened to her ravens whisper in her ear. The fire had touched the sea, the bell had spoken, and the winds now howled in a forgotten language, the same spoken when the Fae-wrought pact was broken centuries before. She dipped her fingers in silver ash and drew a rune on her forehead. "He is not Ceridan," she murmured. "He is something new." Then she smiled. "Perhaps worth watching." But not all who listened wished to watch. Far in the ash-waste expanse, beneath the dunes of glass and blood, a mouth opened. A voice, buried for eons, laughed. The Deep Flame's emissary had fallen, but there were others, and they remembered Kyle's name. Kale himself had returned to landfall near the borderlands of Valion, once a golden kingdom. Now little more than fractured provinces ruled by old warlords and the ghosts of better kings. Word had spread before him. Villagers flocked to glimpse the man who had faced the sea and survived. Some offered gifts, bread, wine, charms of bone and salt. Others simply wept and whispered prayers. Kale did not bask in it. He rode silently, flanked by Erilyn, Selane, and 100 newly trained flame guard. "I should be afraid of this," he murmured. "You should be," Selane said. "This is how gods are made." Kyle shook his head. "That's not what I want." Doesn't matter, Erilyn replied from behind. It's what they want, or need. Their destination was Highhold, the last surviving bastion of the ancient Valian monarchy. Cale had not sent word. He wanted to see what kind of realm greeted a king without declaring himself one. The gates were closed when they arrived, but before he could demand entry, they creaked open. Inside, a pale man in silver. Robes waited beside the banner of the old flame, a sigil once wielded by Sheridan himself. The man bowed. Kyle of Ember, the crown calls. Highhold remembers, please, and come and speak. Cale dismounted, leaving the crown on his saddle. I speak as a man, he said, not a monarch, the pale man smiled. In times like these, that is more powerful. That night, Cale stood before the lords of Highhold. They were cautious, some hostile, others hopeful. They asked questions, they demanded proof. He gave them none, only truth. I did not seek this flame. I was not born to a throne. I have bled, lost, and burned for every step I've taken. And I will not force you to kneel. But I will not let our people die screaming in the dark while old kingdoms whisper of pride. The hollow court has stirred. The deep flame is no myth. Something old is coming, and it wants more than land. It wants us. The hall was silent. Then an old general stood, armor creaking. I fought under the last banner of Valian. We bled for a crown that turned its back on us. But you... He looked Cale in the eyes. You're not a crown. You're a fire. And if I burn beside... You, so be it! They lit the fires in Highhold that night. The banner was raised, not of Valian or Ember, but one Cale had designed himself. A broken crown, wrapped in flame, standing in open defiance. And far away, across the shattered map of the realm, many eyes turned toward it. Some in fear, some in reverence, some in hate. While Highhold's fires burned in Cale's name, a very different flame flickered deep beneath the surface of the world. In the drowned vaults of Obren's Hollow, where even light dared not linger, 9 figures stood around a circle of ancient bloodstone. Each wore a different mask, a wolf, a rat, a serpent, a skull, a maiden, a crown, a thorn. A sun eclipsed, and at the head of the circle a figure with no mask at all, only a face carved from bone, smiling without lips, the nameless Hierophant. He has claimed the fire, said the serpent, voice slithering like oil through the chamber. Broken. The pact, hissed the rat, defied the sea. The crowned figure leaned forward. He's no king, not yet. Then we crush him, said the wolf. Break the myth before it spreads. But the Hierophant raised a finger. No, he whispered. We guide it. A pale scryer stepped into the circle, robes stitched with black salt thread. She poured shimmering sand onto the bloodstone floor. From it rose Cale's image, tired, determined, his flame flickering as he stood upon the walls of Highhold. He believes he leads, said the Hierophant, but even flames cast shadows. He waved a hand and a second image rose beside Cale's. It was a girl, 16, perhaps younger, with hair like wildfire and eyes that pulsed with star-glow. She stood alone in a field of ash, her hand resting on the hilt of a blade not yet drawn. The maiden mask leaned in. Who is she? The Hierophant smiled wider. His mirror. Back in Highhold, Kyle stood atop the tower overlooking the courtyard, watching as smiths reforged broken swords, stonemasons rebuilt fallen walls, and refugees from across the realm trickled in. We have the beginnings of a kingdom, Selene said behind him, but no crown, no law, no coin, no gods. Kyle turned. To her, his voice low. Do we need them? Selene laughed once, bitter and warm. That's what makes you dangerous. He didn't reply. Instead, he watched the southern horizon, where smoke rose beyond the tree line. Erilyn joined them, bloodied and wind-burnt from a scouting mission. He didn't wait for questions. 3 villages razed. No survivors. Same. Signs in all of them, salt runes, bone circles, thorn sigils carved into the walls. Cale's jaw tightened. The hollow court. Erilyn shook his head. Worse. Something new. That night, Kyle held his hand over the map of the realm, candles flickering beside the parchment. Every province was a risk. Some were ruled by tyrants, others by dream-haunted priests, some abandoned, entirely. He knew he couldn't conquer the world, but maybe he could unite it, not by fear, but by flame. Tomorrow, he told his commanders, we march to Olarin. The Garden Kingdom? Asked Selani. They sealed their borders, haven't answered a raven in years. All the more reason, Kyle said. If they fall in the night, no one will hear their screams. Far away, deep in the roots of a forgotten forest, a girl stirred in her sleep. The girl from the vision. Her name was Vera. She did not know Kale. She did not know the crown. But she had seen fire in her dreams, and it called to her. As a second ember began to awaken, the world had forgotten the name Vera, but the flame had not. She lived in the crumbling remains of a monastery swallowed by the gloamwood, where the sun barely touched the earth, and the trees whispered secrets in a dead tongue. Moss grew thick across stone altars, and thorned vines coiled like serpents through windows long shattered. She did not remember where she was born. She did not know who her parents were, only that the old caretaker, Sister Halwyn, called her child. Of the soot, found wrapped in charred cloth lying atop a cold brazier the day the monks vanished in smoke. Vera had always known she was strange. Crows followed her. Ash did not cling to her skin. It moved around her, shifting like fog stirred. By breath, and sometimes, when she dreamed, the trees listened. Lately her dreams had changed. She saw fire walking like a man. She heard a name carried by stars, Kyle. On the 13th day of Frostfall, she awoke in the middle of the night, her hands blistered and glowing. The old braziers of the monastery lit with silent silver flame. Sister Halwyn stood in the doorway, her face stricken with awe and fear. "It's begun," the old woman whispered. "The crown has called you." Vera looked at her trembling hands. "I don't want to be called, I want to be normal." But Halwyn shook her head. "We are never normal when the fire finds us. We are weapons. And now, the world begins to sharpen you." At dawn, Vera packed the few belongings she had, an old dagger, a cloak of faded violet, a ring made from bone and twine, and began her journey south. She did not know where she was going, only that the forest would guide her, and that someone was waiting. By the 4th day, she reached the ash barrows, where the trees grew thinner and twisted monuments jutted from the ground, graves of a war long buried, though the names had eroded into dust. There she encountered her first test. A man with no face, cloaked in blood-colored robes, stood atop one of the broken tombs. "You bear the ember," he said without moving his mouth. "Who are you?" she asked. He drew a bone dagger from his sleeve. A spark snuffer. The duel was not elegant. Vera fought with fear in her chest and instinct in her limbs. The man moved like a serpent, fast, silent, precise. But when he tried to stab her heart, her body glowed. The dagger halted mid-air. Heat exploded from her chest. The attacker screamed as fire erupted from his arm, climbing up like living flame and devouring him in seconds. When it was over, only ashes remained. Vera collapsed to her knees, breathing hard. "I didn't mean to." But the wind rustled through the graves in answer. He would not have stopped. "You are the heir of the other flame." As she stumbled onward, a figure stepped from behind the trees. A woman in black armor, her face partially veiled in smoke. She had watched the fight. She had seen the light. "Vera," the woman said gently, "I am here to guide you." "Who are you?" The woman removed her veil. Her skin was cracked like cooled obsidian, her eyes glowing faintly red. "I am one who burned and survived. They'll come for you now, many kinds of they." That night, the stars burned brighter than they had in an age. 2 embers now walked the world, one crowned by legacy, one chosen by instinct, and in the hollows of forgotten places, the ancient powers stirred. Some would hunt them, some would serve. Them and others would try to make them gods. 3 days south of Highhold, the land began to change. Forests gave way to stone meadows choked by thistle. Rivers ran slow and shallow. The air hung thick with the perfume of forgotten blossoms, heavy and sweet, like the last breath of a dying god. This was the border of Olarin, the once beautiful kingdom that had sealed itself away more than a decade ago when its last queen whispered her final decree. "The world has withered. Let Olarin remain a garden unto itself, and then nothing. No ravens, no trade, no return, only rumors of beauty that decayed from the inside out. Cale rode at the front of his column, flame standard raised but weapons sheathed. Beside him, Erelin scouted the tree line, while Selani consulted a brittle, half-burned map from a time when Olarin still claimed its name aloud. "This road is wrong," she muttered. "The trees have moved." Erelin nodded. "They say Olarin grows wild now. No path stays the same for long." Kyle stared into the overgrowth. "Then we don't follow the path. We make our own." The first sign of Olarin's madness came. At dusk, a gate carved into a tree 8 feet tall, framed in living vines, stood in the clearing. No walls, no fence, just a lone gateway to nothing, and nailed to it a sign written in golden ink. "Turn back. We are not yours anymore." The soldiers behind Kyle shifted nervously. Selani frowned. "There's magic in the roots." Erelin tapped the hilt of his blade. "Then we burn it." Kyle shook his head. "No. Let it stand." He walked past the gate without touching it, the vines rustling in his wake. "We do not come to take, we come to warn." Within the woods, time seemed to unravel. The sun hung in the same place for hours. Birds cried in languages no one recognized. A fox with 3 eyes watched from a branch too high for any natural creature. Then they reached the first village, or what remained. Houses bloomed with flowers, walls overtaken by ivy bearing glowing thorns. Statues of villagers stood in gardens, each twisted in a scream or mid-flee. They weren't made of stone. They had become stone. Erelin knelt beside one, brushing moss from its face. Whatever they touched, it grew through them. Selene hissed, softly. "This is no garden, this is a graveyard fed by roots." Then a whisper passed through the leaves. "Why have you come?" The soldiers raised their weapons. Kale held up a hand. From the shadows walked a woman, her skin patterned like bark, her eyes black with golden pupils. She wore a dress of petal and thorn, and on her brow rested a twisted crown of living vine. "I am Lyra, warden of Olarin's." "Breath," she said softly. "We closed our borders to keep the world out, and now you come bringing fire." Kyle met her eyes. "I come to warn you. The Hollow Court stirs. The deep flame has returned, and the kingdoms of men are breaking one by one." "You think we are men still?" Lyra asked, amused. "We grew past that." Kyle's voice dropped. "Your people are statues in the dirt." Lyra's smile faded. "They chose silence, stillness, peace. A price we pay to keep the old hunger out." Kyle stepped closer. "The hunger is already in. It doesn't knock. It roots, it grows, and when it flowers, it devours everything. Help. There's fight, or the last garden in the world will wither too." Lyra studied him in silence, then turned to the trees. She spoke words not meant for men, and the forest shuddered. The vines across the clearing parted. Behind them, the true heart of Olarin, a city carved from living crystal and rosestone, glowing, faintly under a canopy of eternal green. She looked back at Kale. "Then walk our garden, Flameborn, but tread lightly. For even light, if too bright, can kill the roots it seeks to save." As Kale and his companions entered the hidden city, unseen eyes watched from the high branches. One of them whispered to a raven with no feathers. "He has entered the final garden," the voice said, "and far to the north, in a blackened tower." Beneath a sleeping mountain, the nameless Hierophant smiled. "Then let him plant hope, so we can burn it in full bloom." The city of Olarin was more dream than dwelling. Its streets pulsed faintly with bioluminescent vines, and its towers, grown from translucent rose quartz, curved upward like petals, reaching toward a sun that never moved. Music drifted from unseen. Places, soft and haunting, as if the city itself remembered the songs of its people. But there were no crowds, no laughter, no children playing in courtyards, just whispers drifting like pollen in the air. Kyle walked at the front of his party, every step echoing louder than he wished it would. Behind him, Selani took careful notes in her journal, and Erelin eyed every vine like it might strangle him the moment he blinked. "I don't trust this place," the captain muttered. "Neither do I," Kyle replied. "But sometimes the only way forward is through the rot." Lyra led them to the Heartbloom Spire, the tallest tower in the city, where the ruling circle of Olaran, the Verdancy, watched the world through enchanted root glass and sipped sap. That let them see beyond dreams. They weren't people anymore. Not really. Their bodies were suspended in blossoms larger than coffins, nerves entwined with vines, faces frozen in peaceful sleep. Lyra explained they had given up mortality in favor of unity with Olaran's will. Kale looked at them with grim eyes. You call this unity. I call it surrender. She didn't argue, only gestured to a second chamber, a garden throne beneath a living tree. Sit, she said. Let the grove speak to you. Against his better judgment, Kale stepped into the circle and sat. The moment his back touched the throne, roots wrapped around his arms. He shouted, but they weren't restraining him. They were showing him. Visions exploded in his mind. The first fire, stolen, from the sky and hidden in the bones of kings. A garden before time, where man and God once walked, until betrayal seeded hunger in the soil. A woman, eyes like burning stars, casting down the gods with a blade made from her own heart. And a voice, his own voice, whispering in the dark. You are not the first Flameborn, and you will not be the last. When he woke, he was on the floor. Selani and Erelyn stood over him. You were gone for hours, Selani said. We couldn't wake you. Kyle's hands were still smoking. He stared at them. They showed me a garden from before memory, a war older than kingdoms. And? Erelyn asked. Kyle looked up at the tree above him. And we're losing. It again. Outside the sky cracked. A tremor shook the ground and Lyra's eyes flared golden. The grove wall is breached. Kyle was already moving. Who would dare enter without warning? Lyra's voice was cold. Something that doesn't. Need doors. At the city's edge, the barrier of thorns was torn open. Trees bled sap. Flowers shriveled. And at the breach stood 3 figures cloaked in shadow. They wore no masks. They needed none. Kyle recognized them from a dream he hadn't meant to remember. The scorching choir, worshippers of the hollow flame. One stepped forward, tall, bald, with skin that shimmered like molten glass. We've come for the seed, he said. Kyle drew his blade. You won't find it here. But the man smiled. It has already awakened, not here. There. He pointed to the sky. But Kale saw it in his mind. A girl, red-haired, eyes of star-glow. A twin flame. Vera. The choir disappeared in a gout of flame and ash, but their words remained like smoke in the lungs. Kyle turned to Lyra. The garden will burn if we don't move now. I must find her. That night, under the pulse of Olaran's eternal bloom, Kyle wrote a letter and gave it to Selani. If I don't return, the realm needs you. Selani shook her head. You're not dying in a forest dream. He clasped her shoulder. I won't die, but I may not return the same. Then he turned south, toward the star-blessed girl, toward Vera, toward the fire the gods tried to bury. Vera's footsteps echoed in the ruins of Mirath's Hollow, a city once known for its floating gardens, now sunken beneath a sky of ash. Charred banners flapped in the breeze. Cracked fountains coughed dust. Statues leaned like mourners over streets long forgotten. She had followed the pull of the flame for days now. Not a direction, a sensation, a magnetic ache beneath her ribs that tugged her south. Sometimes she dreamed of a man wrapped in starlight. Sometimes a throne carved from obsidian and bone. And sometimes a tower that bled smoke into the heavens. But today she didn't dream. Today she was being watched. It started with birds falling silent. Then the shadows lengthened, even though the sun hadn't moved. The trees trembled and the wind whispered a name not hers. Little Spark. Little Spark. Vera turned slowly, her dagger already drawn, but the figure that emerged from the soot wasn't one she could fight. He was smoke-given skin. A man-shaped nothing, wrapped in tattered robes of scorched silk. His face a blur behind drifting cinders. His voice was a dry hiss. There you are, the ember we lost. Vera stepped back. Who are you? I am one of many. One of the choir. We sing the world to ash. You've made a mistake. Oh no, child, we've found our flame, the one born of ruin, the twin to the torch of kings. She tried to run. The earth cracked beneath her feet. Vines of black fire surged upward, wrapping around her ankle and pulling her down. But the flame inside her answered. Her scream wasn't terror, it was power. A ring of silver fire exploded around her, shattering the ground, the vines, and sending. A shadow figure reeling. When the smoke cleared, Vera stood in the center. Eyes glowing, hands wreathed in ember light. "You don't get to claim me." The shadow's voice curled like poison. "You already burned for us." Then he vanished, not defeated, just waiting. Vera collapsed to her knees. The power inside her trembled. Each time she used it, it grew harder to hold back. Sister Halwyn had warned her, "Flame is not good or evil. It is hungry. If you don't give it purpose, then it will find one." That night she lit no fire. But one came anyway. A ghost flame hovered beside her as she slept, a light from the stars above. And in her dreams, she saw him. A man walking through. A dead forest, a crown of flame hovering above his back, and a voice not his, but one ancient and terrible. "Two sparks must join, or all kingdoms fall." When she awoke, the ghost flame was gone, but something new rested beside her. A sigil burned into the stone. It matched the one in her dreams, a crown split in two, one side of silver, the other of ash. Far away, Kyle broke camp at the edge of a river that hadn't existed on any map. He looked up at the sky, and for a moment he felt her, not just as a vision, as a tether. "You're real," he whispered. And across the wilderness, miles apart, Vera looked to the same stars and whispered, "So are you." The land between Kyle and Vera was wild, not in the way of beasts and brambles, but in the way of time, of broken things. Here, rivers flowed backward at dusk. Moonlight fell in colors, trees whispered memories they never lived, and ancient ruins rearranged themselves overnight. Locals called it the Rift March, the torn seam between what was and what should never be. Cal crossed it on foot, sword at his back, cloak tattered from bramble and storm. His company had been forced to split 2 days prior, when a stormworm tore through the valley. Now he traveled with only Erilyn and a duskhound named San, both silent and wary. "Tracks," Erilyn said, crouching low. "Recent, small feet, alone." Kyle bent to examine them. They weren't animal, not soldier, not bandit, barefoot, but burning faintly in the earth, a trace of ember. "She's here," he whispered. At the same moment, Vera stood on the edge of a glass field. A wide stretch of land turned to fused obsidian centuries ago in the last Godfire War. She had followed signs too. Dreams. Birds flying in unnatural patterns, stones marked with the twin sigil, and a pull behind her ribs, fierce now, unignorable. She paused only when she saw something else. Not Kyle. Not man. Not beast. A riderless horse stood in the middle of the glass. Its mine smoldered. Its hooves dripped smoke. When Vera approached, it spoke in a voice like cracking wood. "Your other half is near. But so is the one who would burn you both." And then it galloped into the air, dissolving into cinders. Far across the Rift March, deep in the sepulchre of Hollow Kings, the true rulers of the Hollow Court sat unmoving on thrones, carved from fossilized flame. There were 4 of them, each masked, each nameless, but it was the 5th, the Hierophant, who now stood in their center, eyes glowing like coals ground to powder. "They draw near," he said. "The boy of stone and star, the girl of ember and echo." One of the 4 croaked, "Let them meet." Another hissed, "Let them think it fate." The third whispered, "And then break them." The 4th voice was silent, but the air around its throne bent and cracked. The Hierophant bowed. "I will send the Ashborn." That night Kale found a fire. It wasn't his. He approached carefully, sword drawn. There she was. Vera, sleeping by a dwindling flame, eyes fluttering in dream, face softened by exhaustion. Kale froze. This was the girl from the visions, the sigil, the throne. He should have felt awe. Instead, he felt something like recognition, like remembering a song he had never learned. Then her eyes opened. Their gazes met, and the flame between them roared higher. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Vera said softly, "You're late." Kyle smiled, just barely. "I got lost in a garden." She tilted her head. "Was it blooming?" He shook his head. "Only on the outside." Suddenly, a scream split the trees. Not human, not beast Ashbourne. Kale grabbed her arm. "We run. Now." But the trees had already caught fire, and from the inferno stepped a figure wrapped in cracked iron, its body leaking smoke from every joint. A voice like a funeral bell echoed, "Two sparks. Together, let's see how bright they burn." The Ashbourne moved like a curse made flesh. Its armor was scorched black, fused to sinew. No eyes, no mouth. Just a hollow mask where a face should be, leaking pale embers with each breath. Its sword was more a shard of ruin than a weapon, twisted, metal jagged with bone, dragging sparks behind it. It did not run, it advanced, slow, certain. "It knows us," Kyle said, stepping in front of Vera. "It wants us," she replied. Eyes already glowing, the Ashbourne raised its weapon, and the ground beneath it blackened like spoiled fruit. Then it charged. The first clash was thunder. Kyle intercepted the strike mid-air, steel screaming against ruin blade. The impact sent him sliding back in the dirt, boots carving furrows. Vera hurled a wave of flame that coiled like a serpent, but the Ashbourne absorbed it, the fire curling into its joints like smoke into cracks. "It feeds on flame," she shouted. "Then give it too much," Kyle roared back. He dove forward again, sword singing with silver light, while Vera circled wide, her hands glowing brighter, her breath ragged with the weight of rising power. She whispered to the fire, "Not hunger, not rage, purpose." The wind shifted. The flames answered. Kyle ducked a swing that turned an oak to cinders. His blade bit deep into the Ashbourne's side, but there was no blood, only cracking heat and the stench of burned stone. The creature caught Kyle by the throat, lifting him, and that's when Vera struck. A lance of white fire ripped from her palms, spearing through the Ashbourne's chest and bursting out the back like a comet. The shriek that followed was not mortal. It dropped Kale and staggered, but it did not fall. Instead, it split. Its outer body cracked open like an eggshell, and something smaller stepped out. Something faster. Something that laughed. "One flame breaks," it whispered. "The other burns alone." Then it lunged at Vera, and Kyle caught it mid-leap with a shoulder charge, pinning it to the ground. "Light it up," he roared. Vera hesitated. It looked like a child now, a boy made of soot and whispering hate. It reached up as if pleading, "Don't you recognize me? I'm what you'll become." Her flame faltered, but Kyle locked eyes with her. "No, you're not that." Vera snarled, clenched her fist, and let the full force of her flame pour through her veins. It wasn't fire that burned the Ashbourne, it was clarity, a flame that purified. When the smoke cleared, only ash remained. The forest was silent again. Kale leaned against a tree, panting, his arm was bleeding, his chest was scorched. Vera sat cross-legged beside him, sweat on her brow. They didn't speak for a long while, then she asked, "Do you think that's what they all are, the Ashbourne? Echoes of what we could be?" Kale nodded slowly. "Maybe. But we're not them, not yet, not ever, if we fight it together." She looked up, not smiling, but resolved. "Then we stay together. Until the end." Somewhere far away, deep in a tower of black glass and screaming winds, the hollow court watched the battle through a mirror of tears. "She is growing too quickly." One of the throned shadows hissed. "She has him now," another said. "They will not be easily sundered." The Hierophant turned to a chained figure behind the throne, its skin flayed with runes, eyes torn out, lips sealed with gold thread. "Wake the Gloam Oracle," the Hierophant commanded. "Let it see how best to make her bleed." The Blight Peaks had no trails, only scars, jagged rifts where the gods once fought and the mountains never healed. Snow did not fall here. It melted before it could touch the stone, turned to steam by the unseen warmth that bled from deep beneath. The rocks. Some said the mountains were alive, others claimed they were dead gods, hollowed and bound. Kyle didn't care. He only knew that somewhere, among these peaks, waited the last living seer of the first flame, and that she had once said, "Two shall rise, one made of stone, one born of stolen fire, and one must fall and for the other to ascend." Kale and Vera walked in silence for much of the journey. Their fight with the Ashborn had left more than wounds. It had left questions neither of them dared ask aloud yet. But the silence broke when they reached a valley lined with hollow trees, massive trunks carved out like towers, spiraling staircases leading into darkness. They passed one, then another, then a third. "They're watching," Vera whispered. Kyle nodded. "I see them too. Eyes. Dozens. Some glowing red, others clouded like dying stars. But no movement, just observation." At the mouth of the pass to the highest peak stood a single figure, hooded and unmoving. As Kyle and Vera approached, it raised their hand. "Not another step," the figure rasped. Kyle drew his sword. "We're here for the seer." "I am she," the figure said, but her voice was strange, layered, like three people speaking at once. She pulled back her hood. Vera gasped. Her face was not flesh. It was a mirror, cracked, webbed with veins of silver flame, and reflected in it, Kyle saw himself burning, and Vera saw herself weeping fire. "I see what will be," said the seer of the peak. "I see what could be, and I see what must never be." The seer led them into a hollow tree and down spiral steps that seemed to wind forever. Beneath the mountain, the air pulsed with old magic. In the heart of the roots, the seer stopped before a pool of starlit water. Images flickered on its surface. Cities. Aflame, black suns, Kale on a throne of obsidian, Vera in chains of light. "You seek to save your kind," the seer said, "but neither of you were meant to." They both stiffened. "Explain," Kyle growled. The seer turned her mirror face toward Vera. "You were not born. You were built. A vessel, woven from the last spark of the phoenix crown and the dying breath of the Ember Queen." Vera reeled back. "That's not true. Sister Halwyn raised me. She awakened you, but she did not create you." Kyle stepped forward, hand on Vera's shoulder. "She is more than what made her." The seer looked to him now. "And you, Kale, son of no man, born beneath a falling star. You carry the blood of the first Stone Kings, but also something older, something buried. Your destiny is not to rule, it is to choose. When the time comes, you must either destroy." The seer turned back to Vera, or become what she burns to stop. The mountain trembled. The pool turned black. A voice not the seer's rose from the stone itself. "They know you are here. The hollow court watches. Run!" The seer screamed, her mirror face shattering into flame, and Ashborn erupted from the roots. Kale grabbed Vera. "No more running." She nodded, fire already forming in her hands. They turned back to back, facing the oncoming horror. And as the mountain cracked around them, a single thought bloomed in both minds. "We were made for this." The blight peak shook like a beast in agony. Root and stone cracked as the Ashborn poured from hidden hollows, crawling, climbing, some on all fours, others like men with fire leaking from their eyes. Kyle's blade flashed with starlight, cutting through smoke and ash. Vera danced beside him, her fire twisting and folding, flames lashing like serpents at her command. Still, there were too many. The tunnel behind them had collapsed. The only way was down. "Come on," Kale shouted, grabbing Vera's hand as a burning column fell inches from her. Together they leapt over a chasm that had cracked open in the floor, landing hard on a sloping ledge of obsidian that carried them sliding deep into the belly of the mountain. They tumbled into darkness. No flame, no light, only the pulse. A steady, low beat, like a heartbeat, echoing through the rock. Kathum, kathum, and then a faint glow. Vera summoned a flicker of fire and gasped. They were in a cathedral, but not one built by man. It was a cavern so vast it seemed to bend the eye, pillars of molten crystal rising like ribs, runes in dead languages crawling along the walls. The air was thick, almost alive. At the center, suspended in a web of chains made of bone and silver, hung a heart, a literal heart, massive, still beating, fused with stone. Veins ran from it into the walls, into the mountain itself. Kyle took a step forward. "What is it?" Vera didn't answer. The flames in her hands flickered. Then a voice, not a whisper, not a shout, but something like a memory reawakening, rose around them. I am the bone of the world. The first flames stole from me. The hollow. Court silenced me. And now you walk where none have tread in an age of ash. Kyle and Vera stood frozen. The voice continued. I knew you would come, you Flameborn, and you Starforged. You seek to save your kind. But first, you must remember who they were. The walls began to glow with moving images, memories, etched in living stone. Kale saw cities that rose on clouds, human kings who once rode dragons made of moonlight. Vera saw flame priests building shrines in the sky, offering the phoenix crown to protect what was left of a dying people. But then came the breaking, humans falling from the sky, their cities devoured by shadow, not monsters. Not hollow kings, but something older, the Gloam. Before the hollow court ruled, the voice said, the Gloam devoured. They are not of this world. They are not conquerors. They are hunger. Kyle stepped closer to the heart, his breath trembling. Then, what is the court? Thieves. They made a pact. When the Gloam came, the hollow court offered up your kind to survive. They turned your kings to ash. They unmade your gods. They called it a culling, and then they took the throne. Silence followed. Vera sank to her knees, fire guttering in her palms. All she had been told, her birth, her flame, the prophecy, it had all been a reaction to an ancient betrayal. Not destiny, just damage. But the voice spoke again. You were not born to end the world. You were born to ignite it again. Kale, Vera, together you can awaken the world root. Or together you can die beneath it. Suddenly, the Ashborn arrived. They dropped into the chamber from cracks above, howling with fractured voices. Vera stood, her eyes burning not just with fire now, but with knowledge. Kyle gripped his sword, feeling it thrum in his palm, and as the Ashborn surged forward, the heart of the world beat louder. Ka, thum, and from that beat, the E. Earth rose to fight for them. The Ashborn charged, hundreds of them, crawling along walls, dropping from ceilings, wailing in 100 stolen voices. Kyle and Vera stood back to back beneath the pulsing heart of the mountain. No more running, Kyle growled. Then we burn them all, Vera answered, her voice trembling with fury and clarity. But before they moved, the earth did. The stone beneath their feet cracked, not in collapse, but in rebellion. From the veins leading out of the world heart, light surged, gold, red, blue, and deepest black. The mountain did not fall apart. It rose up. The first guardians woke. They weren't statues. They weren't men. They were echoes of ancient protectors, giant. Humanoid forms sculpted from obsidian and root, molten blood surging through glowing veins. Eyes like miniature stars blinked open. With a sound like mountains groaning, the guardians turned to Kale and bowed. Starborn, they said as one. The stone remembers your line. Kale stared, stunned. What are they? Vera whispered. My ancestors' oaths, Kale replied slowly. Bound into the rock, waiting. The Ashborn screamed and attacked, but they were too late. The mountain fought back. The first guardian stepped forward and slammed its fist down, crushing 2 dozen Ashborn in a single strike. Another guardian raised its arms, sending a wave of living stone erupting across the floor, swallowing Ashborn into a molten pit. Kyle moved with them, glowing now. His sword had changed. It pulsed with veins of stone and light, bonded to the world heart. Each strike shattered Ashborn like glass. Each step he took left cracks in the floor, runes blooming in his wake. Vera spun fire into spirals, hurling it with precision. But her flames had changed too. They no longer burned red. They burned white, cleansing, ancient. As the last of the Ashborn fell, Kyle stood before the heart again. It beat slower now, calm. The voice returned. You have woken what was buried. But now the Hollow Court knows you have touched the root. They will come with more than shadows. They will come with the gloam. Kyle turned to Vera, breathing heavy. We have to go. Warn the others. The court will burn. What's left of humanity to stop us. But before they could leave, a shadow detached from the wall. It had no eyes, no mouth, only a mask, smooth, featureless, and blacker than death. It spoke without sound. "You should not have come." Kyle raised his blade. "Who are you?" The Satan figure stepped forward, and from its back unfurled wings of void. "I am the mouth of the gloam, and I have come to unmake you." The cavern trembled, but not from the mountain's heart. The tremor came from the mouth of the gloam. It floated inches above the stone, its wings not flapping but simply folded wrong, like void where reality had torn. The air around it bent, and light recoiled from its shape. Even the flames in Vera's hand dimmed. "You are not of this world," Kyle said. The thing turned its smooth black mask to him. "Neither are you. Not anymore." Then it moved, not like a warrior, but like a thought. Instantaneous. Kyle barely raised his blade before the creature was inches from his chest. It didn't strike, not with fists or flame. It spoke, and its voice unraveled reality. Kyle screamed, not in pain but in confusion. For a moment he couldn't remember who he was. Not his name, not his face, not even Vera. He stood inside nothing. A hand pulled him back. Flame exploded, ripping open silence like a blade. Vera stood over him, both arms ablaze, her skin glowing with radiant script he'd never seen before. She wasn't fighting to kill. She was fighting to anchor him. "It speaks in forgetting," she said. "Don't listen." Kyle stood again, his sword vibrating violently. I didn't, but he had. And a part of him was still falling somewhere in the dark. The mouth of the gloam rose higher, wings spreading wider. Where they reached, the rock turned to dust. The Guardians of Stone stepped forward, trying to contain it, and were torn, apart without touch. One Guardian exploded in a spiral of floating debris. Another melted into silence. Kyle charged, roaring with fury. Blade singing with the voice of the mountain. He struck. The blade sank partway into the creature's wing before stopping. Not because of resistance, but because the blade began to fade. The void was consuming it. Vera screamed, unleashing a column of white flame. And for the first time, the mouth recoiled. It twisted in the air like smoke, screeching without sound. Parts of its form burned away, revealing swirling stars beneath the black mask. "That fire," it hissed. "That crown. I remember it. You should not exist." "The Phoenix Queen is dead." Vera stepped forward, trembling. "Then you remember what she left behind." "I am her will." Kyle pulled his sword free, half of it gone, the rest glowing red-hot. "Together," he said. Vera nodded. They charged. They didn't fight to win. They fought to escape. The battle was chaos, a dance of fire and stone against unmaking. They struck, retreated, burned, collapsed tunnels. The mouth followed them, slower now, its wings tattered. But it wasn't dying. It was learning. Kyle knew they had only seconds before it adapted. And so, in the lowest chamber, he made a choice. "I'll hold it," he told Vera. "You get to the surface. Warn the others." Vera's eyes burned with grief. "You'll die." Kyle touched her cheek. "I'll endure. Because we're going to win. But not if it takes both of us to lose here." She didn't argue. She just kissed his forehead. "Come back." "With fire," he whispered. Then she was gone, and Kyle turned to face the thing that unmade stars, alone. The chamber pulsed with molten veins and falling silence. The mouth of the gloam hovered just above the floor, wings frayed, mask cracked, but its presence remained impossibly vast. It was a piece of another universe, an echo of something so alien the mountain itself was beginning to reject it. Kyle stood between the world heart and the void-born invader. His sword was almost gone. His body battered, but his eyes, his will still burned. "You want to unmake me?" he said, voice low and steady. "Then know my name. Kyle of Orevan, flame-touched, starbound, and heir to the fallen kings." "I remember," the mouth said. "I killed your line once." Kyle attacked, with no hesitation. With nothing left to lose, The sword shattered in his hands with the first blow, splintering into 100 glowing shards. He hurled them like knives into the creature's form. They burned bright as comets, flickers of the mountain's memory. Mouth shrieked without sound. It countered with a ripple of silence that twisted the air. Kyle's ears bled, his eyes dimmed. He fell to one knee, but he reached into the mountain, not physically, but through the bond. "You remember me," he whispered. "So remember now, I awaken you." The veins in the walls exploded with light. The world heart's pulse surged. Once, then again, then so violently the stone fractured under Kale's feet, and from the ruins around him, the guardians that had been destroyed reformed, not as they were, but as living flame and stone. Faster, deadlier. Elemental war echoes of human will. Kale no longer commanded them. He was them. He opened his arms, and the world heart entered him. Power lanced through every nerve. His skin glowed like molten ore. Cracks split across his body, not in pain, but in transformation. His breath came like thunder, and when the mouth of the gloam rushed him again, Kale caught it, physically. Its wings shattered against his arms, its form folded and unraveled, trying to escape him, but Kale held tight and drove both of them into the earth. They fell, past roots, past memories, past where stone itself had forgotten light. They crashed into a place with no name, a pit beneath the bones of the world. Kyle stood, skin glowing gold and red, breath steaming. The mouth reformed, limping through space like a wounded idea, and Kyle raised his hands. From the roots above, fire came, from the stone below, starlight. From the mountain's core, the voice, "You are the flame that endures. Burn it back." And Kyle did. He let go of everything, fear, doubt, pain, and became the fire that had always waited inside him. The void screamed, it writhed, it clawed at him, but it could not survive truth. And Kyle, for a moment, was the truth. So of humanity. Not just what they had lost, but what they could still become. Above, in the broken caverns near the surface, Vera stumbled as the mountain shook again. She turned, fire ready, and from deep below, she saw the flame. Not orange, not red, not even white, but gold, the fire of kings. She smiled. He's still alive, and the war's just beginning. The mountain spat Vera into the light. She stumbled into the air, mud and stone clinging to her boots, her cloak half burned, skin streaked with glowing script that no longer faded. The wind hit her face like a slap, but it wasn't cold, it was burning. In the distance, beyond the broken hills and the ash-choked trees, the sky was on fire, and the last human stronghold, Emberhold, was under siege. Vera ran. She crested the final ridge just as the sun dipped behind the shattered spires of the fortress city. Flames licked the sky, not the living kind. Green fire. Hollow fire. It ate through the towers of Emberhold like acid. The air was thick with screams. Winged war beasts circled the clouds. Columns of corrupted soldiers marched in time with a music no one else could hear. And at the head of it all, he stood, wearing black armor that bled mist. A crown of bone twisted into his brow. Eyes hollow, mouth smiling. Elric, Vera breathed. Kale's brother. Dead for 6 years. Killed on the border of the Whispering Wastes. Or so they thought. Now. He stood at the front of the hollow courts. Army, a blade forged from gloamstone at his side, and a black banner flapping in the burning wind. Vera's mind raced. She dropped low, crawling beneath the cover of a stone outcrop, watching the siege unfold. The defenders, those who remained, fought with desperate fury. Archers fired flame-tipped arrows. Ballistae spat bolts wrapped in sigil script. Mages stood on the battlements, chanting ancient names of protection. But nothing held. The hollow court had unleashed something worse than numbers. They had unleashed the ever-hungered. She saw them, creatures not made of flesh, but of memory and ash. They wore the faces of the dead. They mimicked voices, called out to soldiers using the names of lost loved ones. When embraced, they consumed. Vera bit down hard enough to draw blood. "I have to get inside the city." I have to tell them what Cal found. Before... It's too late. She summoned flame, not to fight, but to cloak herself. A trick the Phoenix Queen once used, a shimmerfold illusion. She became heat itself, barely seen, always moving. She darted between broken trees, leapt over corpses, slid through a trench as a gloam beast passed overhead, wings twitching. Every second her fire dimmed from the strain. But she made it to the southern wall, and there behind the shattered gate stood a familiar face. Eldrin, the old mage, Kyle's childhood tutor, skin like parchment, eyes sharp as winter. He saw her shimmerfold break, saw her stumble in, and raised his staff. Vera, by the stars we thought you dead. Where is Kyle? She fell to her knees. He stayed behind, to fight a thing that speaks in silence. He's alive, but changed. He's coming, and we need to hold long. Enough for him to arrive. Eldrin's face turned grim. Then we hold, with ash and blood if we must, because if Elric now wears the court's crown, then he will not stop until we are all wearing chains. The gates of Emberhold groaned as hollow war beasts slammed their bulk against the stone. Vera stood at the ramparts, sweat clinging to her brow, her eyes fixed on the man commanding the siege below, Elric Kale's brother. He hadn't aged. If anything, he looked sharper, as if something had filed down his humanity to a lethal edge. His eyes were black voids with a flicker of starlight behind them. He turned and looked directly at her. Though impossible, she felt it. "He sees me," she whispered. Eldrin beside her tightened his grip on his staff. They always see what's been marked by the fire. The ground shook as siege towers, carved of bone and shadow, lurched forward, escorted by ever-hungered foot soldiers and hound-like things with mouths that opened sideways. Vera turned to the defenders behind her. What remained of Emberhold's garrison? Less than 400. They were exhausted, starved, armor cracked. But their eyes held the same fire Kale had shown in the mountain. "If you can stand," she called, "you fight. If you can't stand, you curse. We hold this city not because we're strong, but because we remember. Because we still have names." They raised weapons. They shouted their ancestors' names into the smoke. They made ready. The hollow army struck just before dusk. The sky turned green as the gloamstones were ignited, twisted magic pulsing through the enemy ranks. They didn't charge. They walked, calm, certain, like executioners. Vera leapt to the front wall, hands ablaze. She hurled a wheel of flame into the tower nearest her, shattering its upper ramp. Screams followed, but more climbed behind it. One of the ever-hungered reached. The wall face twisting into someone she knew. Her mother's face, long dead, it whispered, "You left me in the fire." She stabbed it in the throat. The battle blurred. Men screamed. Beasts died. Sigils lit the sky. And then he appeared. Elric stepped through the carnage like a dark sun. Everything near him died. Walls melted. Stone decayed. And when he reached the gates, he lifted a single hand. The gate shattered, not broke, not burst. It forgot itself, just vanished, leaving a jagged wound in the fortress. Vera rushed to the breach, flame swirling in both hands, heart pounding. Elric stepped through the smoke. He saw her, smiled. "You always had fire," he said, "but never vision." She raised her blades of flame. "And you had a crown and you traded it for a collar." "No," he said. He raised his hand, and she froze. Not physically. Her memories twisted. Her thoughts broke. 1,000 lies flooded. Her at once, Kale died. The mountain never existed. She'd always served the Hollow Court. She screamed, willed herself to remember. A voice echoed in her mind. "Endure." Kyle's voice. The fire returned. She broke the spell and hurled a column of flame at Aelric's chest. It struck him square and passed through. He laughed. "Kyle will come," he said. "And when he does, I will offer him the one thing he never had. A world with no pain." She faltered, because she saw something in Aelric's eyes, a flicker of truth. He hadn't been taken. He had chosen this. Smoke drifted over the highland valleys. Ash fell like snow. Emberhold burned in the distance. its towers swallowed by green fire, its people screaming defiance into the void, and from the mouth of the broken mountain. Kyle stepped out. He walked slowly. Each step melted frost and charred grass. His armor was gone, replaced by flame-forged stone that clung to him like scales. His eyes no longer held white. They held gold. The world heart had marked him. Not just with power, but with remembrance. He didn't just carry fire, he was fire now. He crossed the veil of dust, silent and alone, watching as the sky writhed with hollow beasts. Above, twin hollow-court wyverns circled Emberhold's towers. Kale raised a hand, spoke no words, and the sky split. A beam of gold light, pure and searing, shot into the air like a spear hurled by a forgotten god. One wyvern caught fire in mid-air, the other exploded, and far below, defenders on the ramparts turned to see a figure walking through flame and ash. Inside the gates, Vera fell to one knee, coughing blood, holding a flame barrier between the last tower and Elric's approaching shadow. She looked up as gold light danced across the stone. She smiled through bloodied teeth. "He's here." Eldrin raised his head, eyes wide. The mountain kept its promise. "Kyle." Elric turned from the gates. The wind shifted, and in the distance Kale's voice rolled in like thunder. "Brother!" The hollow court's army paused. For the first time, they hesitated. Something older had returned. Something they hadn't. Calculated for, Kale stepped through the ruined gate, eyes locked on Elric. He looked like a man, but he felt like a god. The two brothers faced each other for the first time in 6 years. Kyle spoke first. "I buried you once. Don't make me do it again." Elric smiled. "You won't have the chance." "This is the future, Kyle. No more pain, no more hunger, no more failure." Kyle's eyes blazed. "Then why do you wear chains?" Their magic clashed in the air between them. Elric's voidstorm met Kale's Starfire in a blast so violent the stones beneath their feet turned to molten glass. The ground cracked, towers shook. Both armies staggered backward, but neither brother moved. This was no longer a war, this was judgment. And in the sky above, something stirred. The true masters of the Hollow Court had taken notice, because the heir to the fallen kings had returned, and he was winning. Time bent around them. At the heart of Emberhold's ruins, Kale and Elric stood amid a storm of falling ash and broken sky. The armies on both sides had fallen still, drawn into silence by what now unfolded. They were no longer soldiers. They were witnesses, witnesses to the death of a bloodline, or its resurrection. Kyle raised his hand. A corona of gold fire spun around, his arm coiling like a living serpent. "I don't want to kill you," he said. Elric laughed, the sound hollow. "You always were soft. That's why Father chose me. That's why I survived the court." Kyle stepped forward. The ground beneath him cracked with every footfall. "You didn't survive it, you bent to it." "I walked into the gloam," Elric said, "and I came out stronger. While you wandered caves and begged ghosts for power, I made a new kingdom. A kingdom without pain." Kale's fire roared higher. "Then why is everyone screaming?" The ground exploded as they met. Kyle surged forward, trailing a streak of molten gold. Elric countered with a wall of void glass, a shadow mirror that swallowed flame. But Kale was faster. He shattered the glass with a single punch and drove his shoulder into Elric's chest. The impact sent both of them flying backward, Kale into a ruined column, Elric into the remains of the eastern gate. They hit the ground at the same time and rose in sync. Elric spun his blade, spun his A. The gloam steel vibrated with dark song. Kyle summoned his own weapon, not forged but born, a sword of living fire, formed from the mountain's memory. Its edge glowed white-hot, its core pulsed with the heartbeat of the world. They clashed again. This time itself stuttered. The world froze for a heartbeat as steel and flame met shadow and silence. When sound returned, the blast knocked both armies back 10 steps. Lightning cracked across the burning sky. Each strike was a memory. Kyle remembering the boy who once raced him through the orchard fields. Elric remembering the night their father died, and he was passed over for the crown. Kyle, the warmth. Elric, the wound. They were fire and famine. Elric struck low, slicing a black arc across Cale's ribs. The flame armor flared, absorbing most of it, but Cale still bled. He retaliated with a downward arc that carved through Elric's shoulder. Guard burning through to bone. Still they fought. 10 minutes, 20, more, until their magic sputtered, until their arms trembled, until breath came in gasps. And then Elric stepped back and said the one thing Cale had never expected. "I didn't fall. I chose them." Kyle froze. "I was tired of waiting for the world to change. So I chose a world that doesn't care. A world where we are no longer broken." Kyle's eyes dimmed for the first time with sorrow. "Then you've already died. I'm not killing my brother. I'm burying what's left," Kyle charged, not with anger, but with fire that knew sorrow. His blade ignited brighter than ever before. White and gold and blue, a fusion of all the old flames, the mountain's gift, the Phoenix Queen's memory, the fire of kings. Elric raised his sword, but this time it trembled, because for all his power, he had forgotten who he was, and Cale had remembered. The final blow came down like a falling star, and when the light cleared, Elric was on his knees, sword broken. Crown cracked. Cale stood over him, blade lowered. "End it," Elric rasped. "I deserve it." Kyle looked at him, his once brother now a husk of grief and pride. He lowered his sword. "No. You deserve to live, and see what becomes of the world you tried to destroy." Kyle turned. The hollow army began to scream, as if their tether had just been severed. Some collapsed, others fled. A few simply crumbled to dust. Emberhold stood, barely, but it stood. Emberhold did not cheer. It breathed. Smoke rose from shattered towers. Blood pooled in the broken stones. The fires were dying but not gone, and as dawn crept over the horizon, casting pale light across the ruins, Kyle stood alone in the courtyard, hands still steaming with the heat of the last blow. Elric knelt. Nearby, wrists bound in irons etched with runes of binding. Not cruelly, but firmly, like a brother holding another back from the edge of a cliff. "You should have killed me," Elric muttered. Kyle didn't answer. He watched the sunrise instead, the first true light Emberhold had seen in weeks. Inside the citadel, the last council of flame gathered. Eldrin was there, robes scorched, eyes haunted. Vera, wounded but upright. The remaining generals. A handful of mages, and Kale now dressed in scorched leathers, flame quiet around him, but always present, like a heartbeat. Vera leaned forward, her voice low but steady. "You stopped him. You broke the court's hold." Kyle nodded slowly. "I broke Elric, but the court," he turned his gaze toward the north, "is still watching." Eldrin stood, and for the first time in Cale's memory, looked afraid. "There's something we didn't tell you, something only the Flame Wardens knew. The Hollow Court isn't a kingdom. It's a vessel." Cale's eyes narrowed. "For what?" The mage swallowed. "Something older than time. The Ashmaker. A god of hunger that once devoured worlds in silence. It was sealed long ago by the first crowned, buried deep beneath the veil in the Vault of Endings. But now, the court has found the vault. And they intend to wake it." The room fell silent. Even Cale felt a chill that fire could not touch. Vera broke the quiet. "If they wake it, the Hollow War will be a spark compared to the inferno that follows." Kyle stood. "Then we go there. To the Veil. To the vault. We end this before it begins again." But Eldrin stepped forward, shaking his head. "You can't. The vault doesn't open to kings, nor soldiers. Only to those who carry the burden of flame and the wound of mercy." All eyes turned to Cale. He understood even before it was spoken. "The fire chose me for this. Because I spared Elric. Because I carry both." Later that night, beneath the stars, Cale stood atop the broken battlements. Vera approached quietly. "You're not just trying to stop a war anymore, are you?" she asked. Cale didn't answer. He just looked up at the stars. They were flickering, faintly, like candles beneath deep water. "I think," he said at last, "I was born not to be king, but to be the one who walks into the dark. So no, one else has to." Behind them in the deepest cell of Emberhold, Elric sat chained, smiling, not with joy but with knowledge. He whispered into the air. "He thinks he broke us. He doesn't know. The Ashmaker is already awake." The wind changed. It came from the north now, cold, sharp and strange. It carried no scent of life, no birds flew beneath the grey sky, no insect stirred, only silence, and the sense that something was watching. Kyle led the way. Vera walked beside him, still limping from the last battle but silent. Behind them came Eldrin, whispering wards, and two surviving Flame Guard, Sir Jostin and Lyra, both wounded, both unflinching. They followed no road. Only the marks on Cale's skin, runes burned into his arm by the mountain, which pulsed faintly when they stepped in the right direction. "We're close," Cale whispered. The Vale appeared as a tear in the world, a valley cut not by river or time but by something deliberate. Steep cliffs lined with smooth black stone descended into mist. No birds, no sky, only stillness. Vera stared down into it. "No one has come here in 10,000 years, she said, "and none who did ever came back." Kyle didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, and the mists parted. The Vault of Endings was not a building. It was a wound in the earth, a massive circular doorway, over 50 feet tall, embedded in stone like a buried moon. 12 pillars of bone white, marble ringed it, each etched with the sigil of a fallen kingdom. Cale stepped closer, and the runes on his arm flared. One of the sigils, the final one, glowed in response. Eldrin gasped. "You are the last line. Your name, it's written here." Kyle touched the door, and it opened, not with stone grinding on stone, but with a soft sigh, like a coffin being unsealed. Inside, the world changed. They descended into a chamber, carved from obsidian, untouched by time. Torches lit themselves as they passed, burning with ghostly blue flame. Murals stretched across the walls, the first flame, the Ashmaker's fall, the hollow court's rise. Kyle walked in silence, eyes taking. In the truth of things he was never taught. This was never about war, he whispered. This was about what comes after. At the heart of the vault lay a chamber and a cradle, not of wood or cloth, but of chains, and inside it, a being, not quite alive, not quite dead. Wrapped in molten bindings, its face hidden behind a black helm etched with cracks that bled light. It breathed once, and the flame on Kyle's sword dimmed. Eldrin fell to his knees. "The Ashmaker," he gasped, still bound, still dreaming. Vera drew her weapon. "Can we kill it now?" Kyle shook his head. "It isn't weak, just waiting." Then the being stirred and spoke without voice. "You came wearing the blood of kings, but you are not their echo. You carry the fire, but you fear the ash." Kyle stepped forward. "I fear nothing, but I mourn everything. The world you want to erase still has people who fight for it. You are not flame. You are the absence of it." The vault began to shake. The Ashmaker smiled beneath its helm, and the chains holding it cracked. One, then two. Then a third. Eldrin screamed. "The court is undoing the seals from afar, they're freeing it." Kyle turned to the others. "Get out. Now." Vera reached for him. "Kyle, if I don't hold it here, there won't be a world left to save." The final chain snapped. The Ashmaker rose, and Kale, fire burning across every vein, charged forward, into the jaws of a god. The Vault of Endings trembled as Kyle charged into the dark. The Ashmaker stood tall now, unchained, molten, colossal. Its helm peeled open like a blooming flower of black steel, revealing a face without flesh, only a swirling storm of dying stars. And at its center, a pulsing spark, the last ember of its old self, the last memory of what it once was, before it chose to devour. Kyle's sword ignited with the fury of all he'd lost. The flames did not flicker now. They roared like a world being reborn. He struck. The Ashmaker moved too fast. Kyle was thrown back, crashing against a pillar of obsidian. Bones cracked, blood spilled. But he stood again. "You'll have to do more than that," he hissed through clenched teeth. The god stepped forward. "Its voice rumbled like a falling mountain. "You are dust, a flicker, a breath." "You cannot stop the coming dark." Kale coughed blood, then smiled. "I'm not here to stop it. I'm here to choose." And he plunged his blade, not into the Ashmaker's body, but into his own heart. The flame screamed and then sang. It surged through him, not as a weapon, but as a key. The sword shattered in his chest, and the fire entered him, fusing with his spirit, his will, his memories, every choice, every loss, every moment of mercy, the mountain's blessing, the Phoenix Queen's sacrifice, the orphan boy who had no name. They became one. Cal rose, no longer man, no longer king. He became the flame eternal. The vault lit with pure golden fire as Kale stepped forward. "You are not the end," he whispered. "I am." And with outstretched arms, he embraced the Ashmaker. Not with violence, but with sorrow, with forgiveness. With flame that remembered what it meant to be warm, the Ashmaker writhed, shrieked, tried to escape, but the fire entered it, not burning it, but purifying it, not consuming it, but returning it to what it had forgotten. A god of warmth, of rebirth. Not destruction. The vault exploded in light, and when it faded, there was silence, just a single ember floating in the air. It landed softly on the cold stone, and bloomed into a flower of flame. Outside, the skies cleared, the ash stopped falling, and in Emberhold, every soul felt it. Not triumph, not grief, but peace. Vera stood at the mouth of the vale, weeping quietly. Eldrin stepped beside her. "Did he win?" she asked. "No," Eldrin said softly. "He chose." And the world was remade. 1 year later, the throne room of Emberhold stood rebuilt. The crown of flame sat upon a black velvet cushion, untouched, because no one would claim it. Not yet. Instead, they built a statue at the center of the citadel, a man with a sword across his back and flame blooming from his chest, below it carved in stone. "Here lies Kyle of no name, who chose the fire and gave us dawn." And so the tale of Kyle comes to rest, not in silence, but in ember light, where endings become beginnings. He rose from nothing, chose mercy when he could have chosen wrath, and gave up his name to ignite a future for those who had none. The world he saved will never forget his fire, nor the warmth it left behind. In every heart that burns, in every dawn that breaks, Kyle lives on. This was the story of the boy with no name, who became the flame eternal. Thanks for joining me, SagaTwist, in the story of Kale, the fire that burned back the dark. So until next time, may your dreams be bright and your courage burn ever true. Hey there, SagaTwist here, and tonight I'll guide you through a tale carved from shadow and shaped by fire. In a world where gods lie buried beneath ash and kingdoms burn for crowns forged in blood, one human rises, not by birthright but by choice. This is the story of Kale, a nameless orphan, a reluctant warrior, a spark in a world long gone cold. His journey will carry him through shattered thrones, ancient flames, and the very heart of a sleeping god. So settle in, breathe deep, and listen closely, because this is the beginning of a legend, one that ends not with a sword, but with a flame that saves the world. Welcome to Throne of Ash and Starfire, a saga of sacrifice, destiny, and the fire that never dies.